Thank you very much. See, I couldn't live without Don. It wouldn't work. All right, let me turn it over to Mark.
Okay, well, thank you, Gabrielle. I'm happy to join the welcome here. I see so many familiar faces and astonishingly so many new ones, which is very gratifying. One of those faces is Buddy Howell. It was known to many of you. It was more than 20 years ago, Buddy, that you collared me and said, essentially, look, Mark, you're sitting on these hundreds of studies of what works for juvenile delinquency programming, and you're publishing all these academic articles that nobody reads. Nobody in the practice world, anyway, reads. He says, I've got ties in North Carolina. We need to develop something that translates that into a form that's really useful to juvenile justice agencies. And that's where the first SPEP came from. I agreed to take a shot at that. We piloted an early version of the SPEP in North Carolina and did a follow-up validity study to see if, in fact, anything that we had pulled out of that huge meta-analysis was actually related to real reductions in delinquency. And indeed it was. It wasn't, we hadn't found a cure, but we sure had found something that changed the odds. Since then, to make a 20-year plus story short, we've been through several iterations of the SPEP. In fact, I'm working on a new one now because we've just updated the database and are polishing it up to see if we can get to SPEP 3.0 before long. And we've had several additional validity studies, all of which have shown some pattern of promising results that indicates that the guidance in the SPEP, in fact, does lead to better recidivism outcomes for the juveniles that participate in high-rated programs. And continuing to also pursue some of that validity work, because I've always believed if we couldn't prove that this actually made a difference in real world practice, then it wasn't worth doing. So I'm just really, frankly, blown away at how the SPEP has spread to so many different states and so many systems, and to see so many of you that are involved enough in the SPEP to carve out a chunk of your day here to share what you know and to participate in this event. So thanks to Gabrielle for organizing it, and I'm just really interested in what you all have to say.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark. I greatly appreciate it. And welcome again, everybody. I think we had a couple new people just join us, but welcome, welcome. And I am going to jump to the next slide here. I should have done before. Again, Mark and I welcome you for the new folks who just jumped in. And let me get this on the road here. Really quickly, let me give you an overview. And this will be a standard overview as these meetings go forward. We're going to try to follow the same pattern. First, we wanted to do some introductions. I know there's a bunch of us, so we're going to make it quick, I promise. We move then to, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the structure and of these meetings going forward. And then we're going to hear from Pennsylvania. The folks in Pennsylvania are going to talk a little bit about what SPEP looks like there in terms and some of their innovations. But we hope as we move these meetings forward, that different folks, different jurisdictions can jump in and brag on themselves, talk about some of their jurisdictional innovations. Maybe also talk about their challenges and invite feedback. That's really what we hope to get in as we move forward. We're going to do a little poll, informal, of what SPEP looks like in your jurisdiction, so we can get an idea for themes and concepts and topics that probably we need to discuss or bandwidth we need to, the lens we need to use to approach those topics. Try to meet everybody where they are. We're going to take a little bitty break, so we can. So Don and Chris and I can figure out what your responses are in terms of what SPEP looks like in your jurisdiction and learn from that. And then we're going to end with, I have developer Q&A written down here where Mark and I will answer any questions that you may have or thoughts about SPEP that you have. But also, I really would like to invite some of the master trainers I have on the call. Specifically, we've got Lisa Fries, all from PCCD, or excuse me, from Epicenter. Lisa Fries, we've got Shannon Olone on the call as well. We have Krista Park, who is also a SPEP master trainer and who is no longer with EPIS, but formerly with EPIS. Another master trainer, Sean Peck, is with us today. So I would invite them during this QA session to jump in as you feel appropriate and help guide and direct some of the questions. Finally, we'll do a really quick wrap up and then talk about next steps and our next meeting that we have scheduled. So let me go then to our next slide. What you see here are the practice pillars, my pillars of SPEP. You know, we're trying to come up with better outcomes for kids, right? That's why we're all here. I say this a lot. We're not here to get rich. We're trying to make kids' lives better. And so putting research into action to accomplish this by implementation of SPEP has been hugely powerful, right? And you all can attest to that. And you've made it so. But really not just about impact outcomes for, you know, a one and done situation. It's not just about impact outcomes for a while, but rather to embed SPEP model and the process for continuous improvement and provide new program guidance. The goal is to establish with SPEP, right, just to establish and sustain innovation. And in order to do this, we need an enabling context. Implementation science tells us that this enabling context needs to be in place and fostered to sustain change. And the enabling context that we have with SPEP as part of the SPEP culture that we build is this partnership, education, and transparency concepts of these practice pillars. As key values, they'll also guide the format, not just they guide SPEP and the process and how we use the model, talk about the model, present the model, and work with the model, but they also will guide the SPEP Learning Labs. So in terms of partnership, the first one, it reflects collaboration between all stakeholders and is essential in program and service improvement via SPEP. We have this idea of building relationships attached to that. And we encourage and sustain partnership and collaboration. And we know this isn't an innate thing, right? It must be intentionally taught. It must be intentionally reinforced and fostered. And the partnership, what it looks like or will look like in our design on the SPEP Learning Lab calls, they're going to center on building relationships among us. Building relationships among the sites, among the jurisdictions, so that we can communicate ideas, challenges, solutions, innovations, all those kinds of fun things. In terms of education, the second practice pillar, it involves the constant training and professional development, which are essential in the success of SPEP results, influencing practice and policy among all the stakeholder groups. I say a lot, the idea of we want to be respectful. We want to tell and explain why we need the information we need, how it's going to be used, and you know, why it's necessary. And why we're gathering these things are important. And we also know that SPEPers, most of you were trained very clearly that SPEPers, regardless of level, should model and coach using this collaborative and strength-based approach and utilize education as a tool by which you can do that. Education on the SPEP Learning Lab specifically will look like presentations. This first one we're going to hear from Pennsylvania. presentations of innovations and data, relationship building, classification, you name the component, we can talk about it. And it'll allow us to learn about what other sites are doing and help us, I think, to optimize our SPEP implementation. Overall, it certainly will help me optimize scaling with SPEP as we move into other states and counties. The final pillar, transparency, as we know, it includes posting scores and sharing results, collaborating for improvement, having open communication, breaking down barriers and enhancing the collaborative partnership of stakeholders to make better outcomes for kids, right? And being as transparent and honest about it as possible. It's baked into the SPEP process. And when, in terms of Learning Lab, transparency will be emphasized through developer and master trainer Q&A, like we're going to do today, but also, reified through sharing thoughts. Again, I want to just emphasize, we really want this to be, to use Chris's word again, it's stuck in my head, organic. And we want it to be as informal. If you know me, I'm pretty darn informal, and we want to keep it that way so that we can collaborate through conversation. And so partnership education and transparency, these enabling contexts for SPEP are going to guide the SPEP Learning Labs as we go forward. And we hope to emphasize all three elements as part of each call. So let me go to the next slide. The jurisdictions participating, and I know there's some of you out there that aren't on here, but we've got Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Milwaukee, New Jersey, hey Patty, Pennsylvania. We've got our Queensland, Australia folks who are probably having coffee, and Virginia folks. But I know we've got some more folks on there as well. North Carolina certainly is in the house with Betty. And just wanted to share that with you guys. We've also got our expanding SPEP footprint, kind of go through where we are. Some of you are up to date on this. Others haven't seen this slide or haven't seen it lately. Just to share with you, we've got, those are all the states we are currently in terms of implementation. And some areas are more active than others. And we just want to make sure that everybody knows that they're in the SPEP family. Then let's go to the next. Now this is going to be dicey. We've got 41 people on this call, but I think it's important that we all, this partnership, this idea of communicating, I think it's important we figure out who's here and at least do a shout out. If you would, if everybody would show your wonderful faces, put your camera on, and we can go kind of one by one, your name and where you're calling from. And if you're hoping to gain something very specific from this national collaboration, please let us know. We'll take that as a note for future gatherings, but in order to keep this moving, let's, as short as possible, name, agency, and if there's something very specific that you're hoping to get out of these calls, please let us know. Don, Chris, and I are listening and taking down notes. So I'm going to jump up. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to point to Betty because he's up here next to me. If you would just give your name and where you're calling in from, that would be great, Betty. And then just everybody can go one by one.
Buddy Howell, North Carolina.
Somebody else jump in. Tracy, I'm going to call you out because your face is next to mine on the other side.
Tracy Henry, Lehigh County in Pennsylvania. So what I'm hoping, I really like to see how SPEP has been implemented in other states as well as Australia, who I know was part of one of our trainings. So I'm really just curious to see how other states, if they're following Pennsylvania's routes, if they're doing things differently, what they're doing differently. So
great. Thank you, Tracy. And what about other folks from Pennsylvania?
I'll go. Chris Glunt, project manager. Again, we've talked about this. We're really looking to find innovative approaches to really continue to engage and saturate the SPEP throughout our state. So kind of like Tracy said, looking for other ways of doing this work.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, depending on where you're at. I'm Lisa Freese, and as Gabrielle said, I'm a level 3 master trainer, and I've been doing this work for about 10 years now. I'm really hoping to not only gain some new ideas from folks in other jurisdictions, but also to share the experience that we've had here in Pennsylvania and hopefully help troubleshoot.
Hi, everyone. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Lisa.
My name is Lisa Fetzer. I am Pennsylvania SPEP specialist. I am newer to the SPEP project on the specialist side, so I'm just wanting to gain information, absorb all the knowledge that I can. And I'm curious also to see how other states do the SPEP.
Hi, Sue Christner. I'm with Lebanon County Juvenile Probation in Pennsylvania. I'm just interested to hear a little bit about the SPEP process from another state's perspective. I think we're all kind of doing the same thing, but I think it'd be very interesting to hear how someone from somewhere else kind of interprets the process, especially the partnership piece, just understanding how those bridges are built in other jurisdictions.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nicole Matter, and I'm also from Pennsylvania, Dauphin County, level 2 SPEPper, probably since 2013. And I would say one thing specifically that I'm kind of hoping to hear about is how we incentivize the agencies that we work with along this process. I think that it's fantastic work that we do, and how can we incentivize those that we work with to kind of keep this going? Because ultimately it's to the benefit of the youth and families that we work with.
I'm Dawn Krusek. Sorry, Carrie. Go ahead.
You go. I'll jump in from across the pond. So I'm Carrie. I am from Queensland Youth Justice and calling in from Northern New South Wales today. Super keen to just hear everything, SPEP.
Thanks, Carrie. And I'm Dawn Krusek, as you guys have already heard. And I'm so honored to work with Gabrielle in this process. And as everyone has said, learn more about SPEP, but also we've created a lot of resources over the years, I think just in response to things that we have found. So if we can help out other jurisdictions, or even if you have tools that you've created that you could share with us, we definitely want to see this as sort of that additional collaboration of sharing of resources. So I'm so happy you all joined today. Thank you.
What about from Florida? Do we have anybody? I think we do. Amy. Hey.
Hi, Amy Greenwald with Florida Department of Juvenile Justice. And Sarah is on with me. My team oversees SPEP for our agency, and Sarah really takes the lead on the details.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. What about Virginia? I know Andrea is on here.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Andrea McMahon with Quality Assurance in Virginia. And just looking forward to meeting every one of you, and also always looking for new ideas and how to innovate and partner together.
Cool. Some other, we've got, who else wants to go next?
I'll go. My name is Melanie King. I'm a research analyst with the Juvenile Court Judges Commission, a statewide agency in Pennsylvania in the executive branch. I'm also a level 1 SPEPper. We have 2 SPEPers at JCJC. And I'm interested in hearing what other statewide partnerships are involved in other states. And I think one thing that makes Pennsylvania unique is we're a decentralized state. So each county operates their juvenile justice system a little differently. So that's been kind of a challenge, but I think one that we've overcome with a strong partnership. And we even have a statewide data system. And one thing that we've been able to do recently is to work with the team at EPIS, and they give us some data. We're able to match who the kid is and give them risk level scores. So we make sure that we, instead of relying on the provider to kind of dig through paperwork and find those risk levels, we can automatically give it to them and know that it's like within the correct state parameter. So curious for any peer-to-peer learning opportunities.
Great. Who wants to jump in next?
Yes, I'll go. My name is Kevin Perluke. I'm Chief Juvenile Probation Officer in Luzerne County in Pennsylvania. I did this role for about a year. Previously, though, I was a SPEP implementation specialist for a few years, and I am a level 2 trainer. I also echo what everybody else is saying. I like to see how the SPEP is implemented in different jurisdictions throughout the United States and I guess across the pond. So I look forward to it. Thanks.
Hey, this is Christina Zimber with DJJ Quality Assurance here in Virginia.
Any other Virginia folks want to jump in?
Yes, how y'all doing this morning, afternoon, night? I'm not sure. Everybody's all over the place. Justin Woodley, Virginia DJJ Quality Assurance. And I'm just looking to absorb the wisdom on this call, hearing some of the shared barriers that we all may have, as well as some solutions to problems we might not have had yet. So thank you.
Yeah, Justin, that's a big one.
So, Leah Nelson, I'm also from Virginia Quality Assurance Unit. I am also trying to be a sponge, just like Justin said, working on my level 2 train the trainer right now, and happy to see a lot of familiar faces on here from Pennsylvania. Like Dr. Chapman said, it's like a reunion. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dakota Tomlin. I'm from QA in Virginia with DJJ. I just went through the level 1 training about 3 weeks ago, so this is all very new to me. So just like Leah said, being a sponge today.
Great, welcome.
I'm Janet Welsh. I'm the PI at EPIS in Pennsylvania. Sorry to interrupt, Lindsay.
No, Janet, thank you.
I can go. Just ignore my dog. I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
I'm Lindsay Dixon in Virginia, and I'm in the same boat as Dakota, a level 1 trainee baby.
Very cool.
Hopefully you can hear me. I'm not sure if you can or not, but I'm Kevin Heller. I'm also at Virginia Department of Juvenile Justice, and brand new to this, so I'm a baby spepper.
I love it.
One step at a time.
Indeed.
Well, I'll go next. My name is Shannon Alone. I'm another of the level 3 master trainers. Thank you, Gabrielle, for hooking us up with Virginia. I had already privately messaged Andrea and Christina and Leah and Kathy to say, hey, nice to see you. One of the things that I've been with the project for about 5 years, and we're a good team. We've got good leadership and good support in our state. And so if we can be of help to anybody else, please, please reach out privately if it doesn't happen on this call, and we can try to, get something, quick answers. But I did want to go back to Chris Glunt's reference for Saturate the State and explain to where that came from. We started talking when he first came on as the project manager, and part of the excitement about SPEP in Pennsylvania is our ability to let it spread like rapid wildfire. So we've done this idea where we use SPEP Inform to try to get people together on a state level. And so we have a smaller platform here where we do like a smaller learning lab. Hopefully, we're going to be able to gain a lot from this one to be able to use locally. But, every jurisdiction, because we are a little bit different, it does look different. So that broad brush stroke is going to look different in different places. So it'll be interesting to gather as much information as possible and hear how other people are doing things. And so when you think of the Sherwood-Williams, it's interesting we have Australia here, because Saturate the State is paint over the whole globe. I don't know if that's like environmentally friendly, but it's the right mindset.
I'll go. This is John Irvin. I'm Director of Research and Evaluation at the Maryland Department of Juvenile Services. I know my Assistant Director, Shane Hall, is on the call too. Maryland, we're not even baby SPEPers. We're sandwiched between SPEP states, but we're SPEP curious. We have just signed a policy on length of stay and dosage for the kids in treatment in our facilities, and we're looking to kind of a model to help us evaluate that. We had reached out to Gabrielle last year under the previous administration. We didn't quite get an agreement in place, and now we're breaking in a whole new governor and a whole new crew. So hopefully we can start the clock again and get that working.
My fingers are crossed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've never known Kathy Nestaby to be quiet. So
just waiting my turn. And so I'm Kathy Nestaby. I'm with the Division of Criminal and Juvenile Justice Planning in Iowa. We started this SPEP work back in 2012. We definitely have a way smaller team, certainly than Pennsylvania and Virginia. And our new team member, partner, I should just say partner. We don't have a team. It's me and one other person that do this work.
Team.
And Samantha Fuller is her name, and she's on the call. Just have her wave to you. She just started with us within the last couple months. She's our new justice systems analyst. So we've been a little dormant actually for a while because we had a huge window of time where we could not find people to hire for the position. So we've been a little dormant. But we're bringing Gabrielle back to town and going to do some training with some of our hopefully of our jurisdictions in the state to get ramped up again. So I don't have anything specific necessarily I'm hoping for, aside from things people have already said at this point. So I am very hopeful that Samantha will learn from folks as well.
Absolutely.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, yes, I can, Stephanie.
Yay! So I've been arguing with my phone trying to get it unmuted since all of my Virginia team went basically. But good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephanie Morton with Virginia DJJ Quality Assurance Unit. And I think for me, what I am most looking forward to with the National Learning Lab is really learning how you guys deal with some of the barriers. I do facility quality assurance with the One Juvenile Correctional Center that we have here in Virginia. And a lot of people do not like change, right? So we're well aware of that. And just kind of picking your brains about how you guys stood up more of the SPEP process within facilities like that. So just want to soak it all up.
Perfect. Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in?
Hi, I'm Patty Madsen. I originally SPEP'd in Delaware back in 2012. I live in Pennsylvania, but I work at the New Jersey Juvenile Justice Commission, who is not a current SPEP state. And so I've asked Gabrielle and any of you that I could get some videos that used to be online. There used to be the Australia video that was online that I was going to be sharing with my administration. So any sort of training materials that are short and sweet that I could share to try to get the powers that be to implement SPEP in New Jersey would be appreciated. Thanks.
This is great. This is a great venue to be asking that question. Yes, because I can't get them either for some reason. And Deshelle, I'm going to call you out. You're another one. I've never known you to be quiet.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Gabrielle. You are one of the reasons that I wanted to be here today. So good to see you. My name is Deshelle Parker, hailing from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I do have some other team members here. I'm the director of youth justice now, Gabrielle, so I was in quality back then when we implemented SPEP. And outside of wanting to see Gabrielle again, one of the reasons I wanted to be here and to have my team here was just to be able to get the exposure to all of the SPEP work and the various people. We've had some turnover, and so the rest of the team that'll introduce themselves next were not involved in that original round when we started SPEPing. So I'm really excited to get them introduced and be a part of the space. They're all certified, and we still use SPEP various principles and all those pieces to inform our decision making. So my overall reason, again, aside from seeing Gabrielle again, was to be able to bring the new team into the space and just be here again. It's been a long time coming. So I'm just excited to be in the space with other SPEP folk.
We're excited to have you.
And I'll turn it over to Angie, Estania, Tina, and Rachel.
All right.
All right, I'll go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Crossi, Quality Assurance, Milwaukee County. I am a Deshelle follower. So hi, everyone. I'm new to SPEP, so I'm just here to kind of soak in all the good information.
Hello, I'm Estania Smerzia, also a quality assurance specialist with Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm just here again to observe and see what we can learn. I'm also interested in learning about how you can overcome barriers that you have identified. So looking forward to the collaboration.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tina Collins. I'm the program supervisor here at CYFS, and as well as following with Ms. Parker. I am new to SPEC as well, and I am here to just learn the SPEC way and how can we share some of these best practices and that we can find ways to implement them into what we do and to make our communities better and impact our youth. So thank you.
Tina Hawkins in Virginia. I'm very new to SPEP as well. I was in the August 2022 cohort, so still learning, and just hoping to learn more today.
Great, great, great. Is there anybody else who hasn't gone that wants to jump in? And we certainly won't do this every time we meet. I just wanted to kind of, as the inaugural, kind of put faces with names. I know I talk about experiences and you know, talk about the wonderful things that different states have come up with, and it's nice. I think it's nice for folks to see names and put the faces with them in terms of the innovations that I've talked about.
Hey, Gabrielle, it's Jill here in New Orleans.
Hey, Jill.
I used to work with Gabrielle and Mark back at Peabody Research Institute. It's been a while, but I just want to say I appreciate you inviting me to this event. And, you know, as an independent consultant, I would love to see New Orleans take something on like SPEP. We've had, unfortunately, an incredible increase in carjackings and juvenile involved crimes. So anyway, it's tough not being affiliated formally with any juvenile justice agency, but it's a wonderful thing. Thanks for including me, and just happy to be here.
Hi, Jill.
Hey, Mark, it's been a long time.
Yeah, keep fighting the good fight.
Appreciate that.
Indeed. All right, anybody else before we move on? All right, thank you guys.
Can I just say hi to Mark again? Can I just listen? I feel a whole way. Mark, oh my God, hi, Mark.
Hi there.
Just hi. I'm about to cry over here. Okay, you go ahead.
Shell, you're awesome. Okay. So I just wanted to do this first inaugural meeting to kind of just names with faces, as I said, but let's scoot on. I'd love to jump into the partnership segment or excuse me, the education segment, where that was the partnership segment, sorry. Moving on into the education segment, where our esteemed colleagues from Pennsylvania are going to talk about SPEP implementation in their state. And again, the idea here is they're going to be sharing this innovation. They've done amazing things in Pennsylvania and covered a lot of barriers and removed a lot of barriers and faced a lot of challenges, but have moved forward. They've done some amazing stuff with data, and I just wanted them to share that with you in this first meeting. We hope to have different folks come and share every time, but let's jump forward with some of the great work Pennsylvania is done. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, who you met, and Chris.
Thank you, Gabrielle. And Mark, it's a pleasure to see you. I'm not going to cry, but it's always good to see you.
And there's no crying in SPEP.
No, there is no crying in SPEP, no SPEP tears. And also, Buddy, it's a pleasure to see you. I heard your remarks at the Pennsylvania Conference on Juvenile Justice about 10 years ago or so, whenever that was. So it's great to see your face again as well. You're quite
Likewise.
the presenter.
Likewise, thank you.
So I was asked to give you a brief background of how we got started with the SPEP project in Pennsylvania. So with the exception of the newer folks on the call, most of us are aware that SPEP does not live in a vacuum, but rather is a component of a part of a larger juvenile justice reform effort. So what you're looking at on the next slide, Gabrielle, thank you. What you're looking at here is the framework for Pennsylvania's juvenile justice system enhancement strategy, excuse me, or what we commonly refer to as JJSCS. The idea for this strategy came to life in 2010 at a strategic planning meeting of the Pennsylvania Council of Chief Juvenile Probation Officers and the Juvenile Court Judges Commission. As Melanie mentioned, we are a decentralized system, but even so, we're fortunate to have a strong stakeholder collaboration and engagement, both at the local and state levels. This strategy was created on the heels of Pennsylvania's involvement in the MacArthur Foundation's Models for Change reform efforts from 2005 to 2010. It was in an effort to sustain and consolidate the gains of the previous 5 years. So what you're looking at here are 4 stages to the strategy, and when appropriate, we use diversion and prevention, those arrows at the bottom pointing to the left to keep youth from entering our system. But within all stages, emphasis is placed on family involvement, data-driven decision-making, and training in technical assistance and continuous quality improvement. So if you just click on that slide, there you go. So today we're focusing on stage 3, which is where the SPEP lives, behavioral change. Participation in the SPEP process encourages service provider alignment with evidence-based practices and also aligns partnerships between juvenile probation and service providers. So we go to the next slide, thank you. So what you're looking at is the mission of Pennsylvania's juvenile justice system, along with the goals. Early in 2020, the original goals outlined in our Balanced and Restorative Justice Strategic Plan were expanded to include the Juvenile Justice System Enhancement Strategy goals to form these 6 goals for our system. Goals 1 through 3 are the original Balanced and Restorative Justice goals, which were implemented back in 1995 here in Pennsylvania. Click on that screen. Goals 4 and 5 are where the SPEP lives, aligning services to evidence-based practices via the SPEP process and using data obtained from the SPEP assessments to drive performance improvement and decision-making. Now I'm going to pass it over to Chris. He's going to talk about our engagement.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Before we go there, I just wanted to kind of real quickly throw it to Melanie King. She's a representative and she did introduce herself earlier for the Juvenile Court Judges Commission. And we have tremendous support from them, from PCCD. And I just wanted to throw it to her just to talk a few minutes about, how she views the SPEP kind of through the lens of JCJC.
Oh, hi, Chris. Thank you. So I'm attending because I am involved in the SPEP project, but also because the Juvenile Court Judges Commission Executive Director, Bob Tomasini, he very much wanted to be here, but he had a scheduling conflict. But he wanted me to say just a few words about Pennsylvania's support of the project. A lot of the things that Lisa touched on, how it really fits in with our reform strategy of juvenile justice system enhancement, and the evidence-based practices and data-driven decision-making. you know, he wanted me to say people might not know what JCJC is. Or a small executive branch agency. People might expect us to be in the judiciary branch, but we're actually in the governor's office, which gives us an advantage that we have 9 judges on our commission, so they can kind of speak their mind without having any conflict, as if it was in the judiciary branch. Let's see what else. We're small. We only have about 40 staff. 2 of us are trained in SPEP. And the JCJC purpose, we have some enabling legislation. We've been around for 64 years. And the legislation says that we should be involved in developing standards, advising counties, analyzing data, and administering a grant and aid program, which allows the counties to develop JGSES reform strategies. I guess I could say that we've I think worked together from the beginning of the SPEP implementation, and even in the most recent past, we've really, I think, come to the next level as far as sharing data, which I think is really cool that they're able to give us an identifying a number of a kid in a cohort, and we can link it with some of our data. And just that we're very happy to be here, very excited about the SPEP project.
Awesome. Thanks, Melanie. I just want to reinforce, you know, that's one of the reasons I think we've had so much success in Pennsylvania is the support that we have from JCJC, from the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. We receive funding from them to staff a group of people that do this work in conjunction with the probation staff that I'll touch on here in a minute. Gabrielle, if you want to go ahead and light up that slide. Yeah, just to give a quick snapshot of some of the growth. You know, Shannon talked a little bit about saturate the state. I think, and I'm excited to learn this from everybody else, but I think we have somewhat of a unique structure in terms of how we do roll this out and implement. Currently, we have 25 counties that we call are trained to implement the SPEP, meaning we actually work with juvenile probation officers in those counties. We train them, and then they help with the assessments of the service providers. So there's 25 out of the 67 counties. We've trained folks in those counties to assist with that process. You know, to date, we've engaged more than 65 of our service providers, and we continue to look for some of the service providers, especially from a community-based standpoint, that we haven't quite hit on yet. We've done a really nice job in Pennsylvania of hitting all of our residential facilities, or at least a strong majority of our residential facilities. And now we're really trying to open up some doors from a community-based perspective. We also just touched on earlier, you know, our SPEP informed model, right? So I talk about the 25 counties out of 67 that are essentially implementing the SPEP. We've also trained 38 to interpret the SPEP, right? So we really want this to be as translational as we can. It's not really just about going out and you know, scoring a service. We want to make sure that the officers in the state understand what that really means. You know, what's the difference between a basic and a POP score? How did we land on this score? And we've developed some resources that we share publicly so that they have that information available to them. And that SPEP informed model has allowed us to train almost 700 officers since about 2019. And again, this is just an image of Pennsylvania, kind of highlighting our engagement, our saturation. You can see those green counties, or those level 1 counties, right? They have the capacity to fully implement the SPEP. They've got trained SPEPers. They participate in our learning communities that we have quarterly. And then our yellow counties, there's a lot of new yellow counties for us, our SPEP informed counties, where we're really trying to push this education out to the masses. What is SPEP? How do you understand it? And how do you utilize it? I know Sean Peck, he's been relatively quiet on this call, but he was formerly in my position for a number of years, and he did a great job. He was instrumental in really getting the rollout started in Pennsylvania in many ways. And I wanted to make sure he received a little credit for that, because he did a fantastic job. I'm going to turn it over to Dawn Karosik, and she's going to talk a little bit about how we've established a process and some of the tools that we utilize in PA but Sean was instrumental in trying to push a lot of that forward.
And Don, real quickly, but if I can jump in, I failed to say this, but if you have any questions, jump in.
Yeah.
And we want this to be interactive. I also just want to say for some of the folks on the call, this idea of STEP informed is relatively new. It's something Sean and I worked up many years ago. But it's the notion that what I was finding for implementation across the US and Australia, not everybody was set up to hit the ground running. Not everyone had the data specifically to get to the full SPEP score, whether it's the basic or the POP score. And what we were finding was there was great value in just the part of the SPEP model as using it as leverage for building better data systems, using it as leverage to improve or set up new programs. I've got a new program, what do I need? Well, let's go look at quality. We need some sort of protocol. We have these guidance pieces that are built in or baked into SPEP, and using those to help folks. And Chris and I have talked a great deal about this, with this idea of SPEP informed kind of being shored up in Pennsylvania, is the notion that there's different packages, so to speak. You may have the data and you may be ready to do the full bore SPEP and get to the score, but not everybody is set up there. So let's not leave them out. Let's meet everybody where they are. And that's kind of something Chris and I developed and originally with Sean Peck and I in terms of the SPEP informed piece. So it might be new. I just wanted to be clear on that. It might be new to some folks who are on the call. This is the reason for these meetings, is letting you guys know there are these variations, these innovations that we've done. So I just wanted to highlight that before you spoke, Don. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, actually, Gabrielle, we do have a question from Stephanie Morton. So I wanted to go ahead and open up that space. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Thank you. Dr. Chapman, could you go back one slide? I had a question relating to that. Yes. So, Mr. Glunt, I wanted to ask you, the very last bullet on there, it mentioned 687 officers trained to interpret the SPEP.
Correct.
What level are those officers? Are they frontline? Is it admin? Like where do they fall?
No, that's a great question. I would say it's a combination. What we've actually tried to do in the last 2 years is we've sent our staff out to do kind of on-site county-specific training, right? So we're actually driving out to a particular county and we engage their entire staff. So you may have the chief, you may have a supervisor, and you may have 12 line staff that are engaged in that conversation.
Okay, cool. I was just curious. I hadn't seen that, so I thought that was pretty neat. So thank you for allowing me to ask.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and the next image there with the map, right? This actually is an image of an interactive tool that we've created in Pennsylvania, right? So not only can you see the counties that we've engaged, the red and blue dots are actually services that we've SPEP'd, right? So this is part of our SPEP informed training where we educate our officers in the state about the services that are SPEP, where they can go to find that information. So you can find what we call the score interpretation sheet that Dawn's going to touch on. You can see what the score was. We also have developed what we call a SPEP service sheet, which is really built around the utilization of that service, right? So how is it classified? What are the amount of service targets? We're thinking that's a resource that our JPOs can take into court to better define why they're making these recommendations, especially as it relates to amount of service. So good question. Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on before I turn it over to Dawn, Gabrielle's right. This is going to be very, very surface level. Please ask questions. We want this to be as interactive as possible so that we can all learn.
All right, I think I'm up. Maybe, yes?
You're up. Yeah, you're good.
All right.
You're good to go.
Thank you. And yeah, definitely, Stephanie, great question. In that number also, and something I will talk a little bit about as well, is we actually train our providers. We have different designations, SPEP 101 or SPEP informed. Providers get that SPEP 101 sort of version, but again, it's still just understanding what SPEP is and how it relates to them, how to interpret the results and things like that. So that number is actually bigger if we want to be specific on how many people have actually been trained. But just to give you that idea. So operation, oh my gosh, I knew I wasn't able to say that word, operationalizing the SPEP in Pennsylvania.
It's making me feel better because I fumbled.
I know, I knew it. Anyway, so how do we make SPEP work in Pennsylvania? So throughout, what you've heard already, you've heard some sort of terms as far as tools we've used and things and resources that have been created, some acronyms and things like that. So I'll definitely try to make sure to be specific on when I'm bringing things up. But the guiding principles of how we've made it work, these are kind of the three main areas that really help us get the SPEP to be successful in Pennsylvania. We have an implementation manual. This was developed about 3 years ago, and it does accompany the SPEP user's guide, but it's just something that we provided as a resource for our own internal team as far as the probation officers trained as level 1 and 2s and our team as well. The life cycle and partnership in Pennsylvania, what does that look like and how does that affect the process and keep this project alive? And then also the training structure and networking. I mean, you've heard about that SPEP informed concept that, as Gabrielle just mentioned, that's probably newer to some of you folks. So that's definitely something I think that's made a big impact on really increasing that saturation as far as, probation officers understanding what SPEP is and getting departments involved as much as we can. I will talk a little bit more about the resources on the next slide. So I'm just going to kind of go through, I know we talked about this as sort of like a little bit of showcasing, a little bit of show and tell, but also just sharing what we have created. And, afterwards, as someone else had mentioned, reach out at any time if you have questions, or, we've talked about even having sort of a repository of all these resources sort of shared across all jurisdictions to be readily available. So again, these were things as far as tools and resources that we've developed over the years to assist with the implementation of SPEP. And we really have stayed true and consistent to the fidelity of the SPEP model. And definitely with Dr. Chapman's guidance and blessing, some of these things have been revised and are made specific to our needs. So what you see here at the top there with service classification, we have something which was created with service classification fact sheets. This is actually was brought from the user's guide, but it actually just has all that information you need to inform and the indicators for classification guidance. So that's just kind of an extra resources we've created to kind of have, readily available to be able to go through when we are classifying services. The full program profile, that's, probably a lot of you are aware of what that is, but it's that menu of services. This is that document that captures that for us. So we have made some information, changes on how we identify that information and how we've organized it, really just how it works for us, the best way. Under service quality, you can see there's 3 things as far as resources. We have our quality measures checklist. And I think this is one of the ones that I think for me would be most interesting to hear how everyone has sort of responded to that quality and how to assess it. So as you can see, we have a 7.0. So it's been through a few iterations, but again, that's just really to help us really focus and understand how is that quality assessed and how well are we, helping them when we do give recommendations. So we talked about with probation officers being trained to implement SPEP, we have a quality of service interview guide. And because of that partnership that probation and provider has, probation is usually leading that role as far as when we do these quality of service interviews. So I will highlight these items here in a little bit, but just so you are aware, we have this interview guide to kind of help with that process, especially when we have new folks getting trained. It's really just points, things to look for, things to ask for, what are we meaning when we're asking these questions? And then I think this is a newer term that maybe some of you haven't heard is the inter-rater reliability. Again, these crazy words that I can't say, but this is a tool that goes along with the process when we are measuring quality, and it really just helps us stay consistent when we are measuring that quality. As far as the level of risk, in our state, we are using the youth level of service, the YLS. I'm pretty sure, every state's using something different, but as we've talked about, Pennsylvania is decentralized, 67 counties doing 67 different ways. So not every county was doing YLSs. I think it's probably been now about 4 years ago when the last county came on board, as far as officially doing YLSs. And as Melanie mentioned, there's that data and that information from those YLSs that we're able to gather, from JCJC. So it's really a helpful tool. Moving on to the next slide. So what you see there is, the data collection. There has been mentioned we have a data sharing agreement. And again, this is kind of like you know, when we started out early on, we didn't really know what we didn't know. So there's certain things that, you know, understanding how that process could be a little more seamless. So I think, as we've talked about, that we have really strong relationships with our stakeholders, and being able to share that that information back and forth data wise, I think is just really instrumental. And I know we don't really have a mention of it in here, but we have, I don't say we, but there has been a Pennsylvania validation study that was done a few years ago. So having that information from the data and those cohorts, you know, is really helpful and instrumental in being able to complete that. As far as deliverables, you know, this is, again, something that I think everyone is providing some sort of feedback report. That's that summary of the findings, our recommendations, which really then builds into that PIP, the performance improvement process. There was a brief mention about the score interpretation sheet and SPEP service sheet. The score interpretation sheet was a request by our funders early on to have sort of a deliverable that could be available on the website to the public. So it's basically a 2-page summary of this SPEP assessment. And, you know, we're giving that information along with the score and the recommendations that were provided. And those documents, as far as the score interpretation sheet and the SPEP service sheet, those are actually also available on that activity map. So if you click on a dot on our map, you can access those records as far as any SPEP assessments that have occurred. So again, having that SPEP informed training concept to be able to at least get departments understanding what's available to them for resources, even if they just don't have the means and resources to be able to be trained and implement SPEP. I mean, again, we're meeting them where they are at this point with the project and everything like that. So performance improvement, I know that from my understanding, I mean, I've been with Project for 4 years, so there's so much more history and storytelling. I always try to remember all the details, but, you know, from my understanding, that process early on of, you know, how to put on paper to track that process and progress was something that was developed. And, you know, I think that's really important because this is where we are helping the providers as much as we can. And that kind of goes into that technical assistance. You know, as I think that's one of the benefits of what we can do for providers and probation is how do we help you? And I think the level of our involvement with technical assistance has definitely increased over the years. So, you know, I think there's just much more need for it as we come out of COVID. We have a lot of providers struggling with staffing, not having the manpower to really get the stuff done. So as you can see, the service manual template and the service impact map, that was something that was mentioned a little bit ago, but these are resources that really help providers as we see sort of consistently across the board, a lot of these community-based homegrown services that don't have developed curriculums, sometimes don't even have a manual. So this is really where we're able to help move that needle as far as helping improve that service. So the template for the manual, it's really providing that framework and template to outline those necessary SPEP components, as well as additional implementation science principles at the discretion of the provider. And to help build off that is that service impact map. So, you know, sometimes they just deliver a service because that's what probation asks for, and they don't really know what's the intent or what are the outcomes other than recidivism reduction. I mean, that's kind of a given, but, you know, this impact map really is helping them clearly define the goals of the service for the target population, the process to achieve those goals, and then a response when implementation or outcomes are just not being achieved, the fidelity. So those are some of the resources and kind of parts of the process that help us get through that as far as getting, you know, completing a SPEP assessment. But I did want to talk a little bit more about the quality measures checklist. And Gabrielle, and if anyone has questions, sorry, I'm just talking away, so I can't see anyone right now.
No, Dawn, I'll just add, go ahead, Gabrielle, did you want to say something?
No, go ahead, Chris.
No, I just wanted to add, you know, the quality piece, right, that Dawn's going to talk a little bit now, and the performance improvement piece is something that we're really looking closely at, right? More than just giving a provider a score and giving them some things to work on, we found there could be a lot of value in us actually providing some hands-on TA. And that's what Dawn's talking about, right? Some of our service providers really lacked the ability to really manualize what it is they were doing. So to develop some resources to try to simplify that process has been high on our radar. So I just wanted to emphasize, those are things we're really interested to hear if other jurisdictions are doing things like that relative to performance improvement and areas we could even learn from other sites. Go ahead, Dawn.
Thank you. And Gabrielle, did you want to say anything?
No,
okay.
Chris covered it.
Okay. All right. So quality measures, our checklist. So again, this is how we are assessing quality in our our state. And that's, like I said, this is something I'm really curious to see how everyone else is doing, because I've seen different versions or variations of how you gauge that. So our checklist is actually 20 questions and broken down, and we have 4 categories. As you can see here, we have written protocol, staff training, staff supervision, and the organizational response to drift, those tools to, for fidelity mechanisms of monitoring. So we have 5 questions per section, and depending on how many measures they meet, then gives them a range of low, medium, or high, 5, 10, or 20 points. So that's an area where like I said, we're at 7.0, and I think it's just over time, we learn what we're really looking for, how we really want to figure out that answer. And, and this is really what drives our recommendations as well, too, because this is where we see that provider having the most influence.
And Don, I think I'm going to speak for a bunch of folks on the call. I think this is quite interesting to a lot of folks, because when we implement SPEP, the idea is this is our baseline, right? This is what we need for quality in terms of SPEP, but we've allowed and encouraged other folks to customize it as appropriate for their system, either working with existing data sources or putting in key pieces that are politically or appropriate or otherwise important. And I know, like Florida, for example, I think has some turnover information in there as well, but regardless, they're all proxies for quality, and they get at what we absolutely need in terms of SPEP. So I think that this actually might be very interesting to folks to see, maybe even doing a session of what quality looks like across all the sites, what people have worked up. And normally my guidance at this point is now, this is what the basic we need for SPEP to meet and be in fidelity with the model. But then here are some other options in terms of getting increasing complexity. But with increasing complexity comes this inter-rater reliability issue of, when we're increasing complexity, how do we all make sure that we're answering in the same way and that we're being consistent. So that was just my little thing there. I wanted to highlight this because I thought lots of folks would be interested.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, like I said, that's where I'm really interested to see how the take on it is in other jurisdictions. So under written protocol, what we're looking for, the resources, materials, policies in place to guide that service delivery. Training, we're asking questions about training requirements and associated prerequisites to deliver that service. Staff supervision, mechanisms in place to not only monitor employee performance, but also overall service delivery. And then that section on drift, those mechanisms in place to help that agency monitor and respond to drift. And I think over time, we've kind of moved from employee drift to service drift. So that's another sort of, way of thinking. We're not here to penalize your employees. Like, how do you get that service back on track? And what are ways are you able to make sure that's happening? So as Gabrielle mentioned, the inter-rater reliability, this is just a snapshot of basically it's a spreadsheet. After we complete these quality of service delivery interviews, this is, probation and the EPISPEPR folks, we sit together and we sit down, and this is sort of that collaboration where we kind of go through scoring, like say, how did you score on your own? And then as we talk it out, did we disagree or agree? And then we come to a consensus. So this is just a nice way to kind of keep track of that. Again, to really establish that consistency and reliability and the assessment of quality, because, we all hear different things and we might think different things. So I think just being able to talk that out amongst each other, I think that's such a really important part of this process.
I think even as Mark, I think you said once that it's the mushy. I don't know if mushy is the right word you use, but it is the mushiest. That's my interpretation. Maybe I'm paraphrasing, I'm sure, of the measures and of the components to measure. And so IRR, inter-rater reliability, is super important in terms of the quality item.
Well, and I just want to add, I think this is important context too. We recently had a statewide learning community. We actually broke it up regionally, but the emphasis was really around this inter-rater reliability. We did some mock exercises, and the folks that rolled this work out in Pennsylvania seemed to really, really enjoy that. So just another opportunity to build that reliability and consistency across our state in how we assess quality.
And we like to use the word squishy. There's a lot of squishiness going on. So moving on from the IRR, one of the deliverables, again, probably not something new to your jurisdiction as far as maybe a feedback report, but that summary of findings, recommendations for service improvement. One of the things that our team has done to kind of make this process a little easier is we've created templates for every service classification there is as far as a feedback report, whether it be a baseline or reassessment. So it's a lot of, it helps these reports also stay consistent as far as what we're sharing. The really unique part of each report is that narrative when it comes to the quality and how we're talking about, strengths and weaknesses and areas that they can improve upon. We love data. Our data manager, Krista Park, is on here. She's done an excellent job as far as adding, we try to give as much information as we can. So now we actually have a breakout as far as the county breakdown for how many counties were involved. We talk about the risk level of all of those youth and what that looks like per county, and then the dosage and duration. We also break that down as well. How many from that county met the dosage and duration? So when we're looking at these large residentials that might have 20 plus counties involved, counties can get these reports because we do share this information as long as they're level 1 trained. We do share that information if they weren't necessarily involved in that SPEP assessment at the time. So I might be going too much in the weeds as far as our process, but again, we try to give as much information as we can. And when we have that data to share as well, I think that really just helps tell the story even more. And then the performance improvement process. So we have we call our PIP template. And this is an area that as a project in our team, we've actually looked at kind of reassessing sort of how we're doing it ourselves. Again, I'd mentioned about coming out of COVID, we have providers that really just don't have the manpower to possibly look at 10 to 15 recommendations, but maybe 2 to 5 makes sense. And so I think, helping them focus on where they can really move the needle, where we can help them. And then we plug this into the plan. And this is just a way for us to continue to monitor their progress. So we do meet quarterly. We had some providers that are like in the 2 to 3 year mark of still in their PIP plan. But again, I think that was really as a result of COVID. So we're trying to shorten that length of time as well. So try to keep it in a year's time frame. Really focus on those SMART goals and, make those in a timely manner and achievable. So that's, I think, as we move and learn as a project, again, these are ways that we've really responded to the needs of our providers and kind of some of the things we've seen as far as challenges that they're facing. And that's the page 2 then where you can see where, each quarter we meet, we track their progress, we have them rate the level of completion. And again, this is just that historical piece which helps tell the story. So, if we're kind of curious of what did time 1 look like? What were they working on? How did they accomplish that? Again, this is just definitely a nice piece of information that you can keep to always be able to tell what was going on. And I mentioned about our implementation manual. So again, this is really just working off what we've already been given as far as tools and resources, but it's a companion resource. And it also builds upon what's in the user's guide to highlight the things that we also found that work. There's the explanations of those core components, examples and strategies of lessons learned. I think, the more we learn, the more we can keep growing and making improvements ourselves. And those resources developed over the course of the project, I think, we're constantly being innovative. And again, how do we help these providers? How do we, sort of do that heavy lifting for them if we can? So I mentioned about the life cycle of the SPEP. And so what you're seeing here is basically the life cycle of the SPEP in Pennsylvania. We view it as a continuous quality improvement perspective, which really helps align with our state initiatives of service provider alignment and utilizing the evidence-based practices. And, while building and reinforcing a climate of partnership, education, and transparency, we really enforce those pillars as well. That's every part of our day when we're doing the SPEP. So that kind of those concepts is really embedded in the way we do the things in the state. So the assessment itself, we feel is driven by that partnership, so the provider delivery, court usage, and then that service classification type. So everyone's sort of equal parts to the table while that SPEP life cycle is sort of revolving around it. And then this, basically the training structure, which I'm pretty sure you guys have all seen. This is something we actually borrowed from Gabrielle, but as we mentioned, we train our JPO officers to be level 1. And again, that's based on that department's capabilities, the resources, do they have the means? Do they have staff that they can get trained and do SPEPs? And so once they are committed to doing that training, they go through the exact same steps that anyone else went through for level 1. They have that classroom training, they're shadowing, they're also facilitating as well to get those requirements to complete to be able to get the certification. And I know having, being in COVID, we did a lot of stuff virtually. So that actually opened up the doors for a lot of shadowing opportunities, which was nice because before COVID, I know I was always on the road. So to have someone on the eastern part of the state to go all the way to the western part of the state, that wasn't so feasible. So we had some opportunities for departments to be able to see sites that maybe they wouldn't have been as far as, in traditional times. And to help with that process as far as keeping track, this is our checklist we've created for the probation officers, kind of have that ownership over their own training. We keep track of it for themselves, but again, this is just another way for them to see, okay, these are the steps I have left to be able to complete my certification. And what you're seeing here is our implementation structure. And this has really been the asset to keeping this SPEP project alive. It just, without this, we probably wouldn't be as productive as we are. So you're seeing some of those acronyms, the JGSES leadership team, that's sort of at the top. They oversee the training and technical assistance related to any of the JGSES initiatives. So again, it's really important that they are part of that process as well. It really is in reinforcing the supporting guidance from the JCJC and PCCD as far as their support. We have the PCCD SPEP advisory group. That's the next tier, what you're seeing there. So they're reviewing SPEP project challenges and successes. They do meet quarterly. So they're reviewing resources developed for the project. They make recommendations to the JGSES leadership regarding the SPEP project. I know, as far as data sharing, we are providing a lot of information as far as successes and completions and things like that whenever we do meet. The next tier there is the SPEP learning community. I know Chris just kind of mentioned we had a meeting here. So that's another sort of, we call this the boots on the ground for SPEP implementation. So this is all of our probation officers that are trained as level 1s and level 2s, as well as our EPIS folks. And we do meet quarterly. And we actually just had our first in-person one a couple weeks ago. Everything's been virtual again for the past few years. So it was nice to be able to see everyone in person, and we did it regionally. We had the eastern part and the western part, and we still connected by Zoom. But it was really nice to see everyone in person. But we're really able to celebrate successes, address concerns, related to SPEP implementation. As Chris mentioned, we provided a booster training and sort of ongoing competency development. So we're always looking for ideas. What do you guys want to learn about? What do you need to work on? Depending on what's happening with the system at the time. And then we're also sharing the SPEP activity throughout the state. So we do actually county report out so everyone knows who's involved in what. And that last tier there is the SPEP informed community, which you guys heard about. So that's, again, any person, provider or probation, depending on what level they are into probation or even in the provider world, anyone who's been trained to interpret the SPEP results. So this is another community where we can bring people together. So that's happening quarterly as well. And then this will be our second year in a row where we've done an end of the year combine. So we'll have the learning community as well as the SPEP informed community together to meet. And again, we just really just talk about all this, the strengths, challenges, things that we can work on. It's really nice to have information sharing and to have departments be able to talk and see each other that maybe they wouldn't have in another venue. And I know you'd seen this before as far as part of the partnership, but this is, again, something that we just can't understate. So we really value that partnership and collaboration that occurs throughout that SPEP process. And I think that's really the inherent benefit, is really strengthening that relationship between probation and provider. I would like to open up the floor to Sue Christner. Are you still on here, Sue? There you are. She's a level 2 SPEPper, and she's from Lebanon County. She's the deputy director for Lebanon County Juvenile Probation, but I had asked her to talk a little bit about the probation partnership provider piece and what that means for their department. Go ahead, Sue.
Thanks. So I'll just kind of start by saying I stepped into the SPEP world kind of accidentally. I was fortunate enough to be part of a SPEP assessment of a community-based provider in our county that was done by Sean Peck and Nicole Mattern. It was part of a state project. They were coming in to look at an array of services that were being provided by one of our local providers. And the funny thing was that I had actually helped, I partnered with that provider to create this specific program that we were using in our county. So I thought, oh, this will be really easy, right? I helped to build this program. I knew a little bit about the SPEP, not much. I was basically invited in to sort of be that probation liaison between the SPEP team and the service provider. And, you know, I say to this day that when we got through that SPEP assessment, by the time we were finished, I learned things about a program that I had helped to develop that I had never realized before. And, you know, now, after being trained in the SPEP, I really understand it's because, you know, before the SPEP came along, I think a lot of services were seen through the lens of, you know, your unique perspective. So I was always looking at services as a probation officer or as a consumer. And the service provider was viewing their services through the lens of, you know, that the deliverer of that service. And when you come together and you look at it through the SPEP lens, you really see these services in such a unique and different way. One, you really get to appreciate them for what they are, for all the hard work that goes into implementing and delivering a service. But as a consumer, I think it really helped to open my eyes as to all of the work that a service provider does to simply deliver that service every day and the intricacies behind that. It's not just, you know, going out and doing mentoring with the kid. When you break it down and you look at everything that goes into, you know, maybe those couple hours a week that a service provider spends with that child, you're looking at all of those different quality measures, you know, how they're delivering the service, how much, how often, how are they supervising it? You know, what kind of training is involved behind that? Their mechanisms for response to drift. You really peel back the onion. You really understand that when you have whether it's a community-based service or a residential service, that the effort that goes into that is immense and should be appreciated. And, you know, prior to the SPEP, I think a lot of what we did was we handed kids off to service providers. And we said, okay, we did the probation supervision. I'm going to hand that child off to you and you go do the service delivery. We know now that's not the most effective way to do it. We've got to work as a team. When we're really all invested in that kid and all of the rehabilitative services that are being provided, that's when we're most effective. And when we SPEP a service, we sit down as a consumer with the provider and we equally take ownership over that service and making it the best that it can be. We all become invested in the service. And we all become invested in the service because we're all invested in the outcomes of that service. I think another really unique piece of the partnership that I have valued is that it has opened up a line of communication between probation and providers to really understand what services we need, what services that provider can deliver, And it helps us to align, you know, the outcomes that we're looking for. For the probation and the court to really know what services are what those services are that we need, and to be able to speak the same language through SPEP with a service provider so they understand exactly what kind of service it is we're looking for, so that our outcome goals are aligned. That's really where everything comes together through the SPEP. And we're really making sure that we're all driving, you know, this train down the same set of tracks. It's really interesting to work with providers who have been through the SPEP process, because we all speak the SPEP language. So when you're talking, you know, during a SPEP assessment, or even just talking about, you know, their programs or services in general, when you can use a language that everyone understands, it really enhances our ability to better communicate. It enhances our ability not to just communicate with one another, but also with the court, who has so much influence over the types of services these kids get and how long they're actually subject to those through, you know, length of care. So I think I've really learned to appreciate the partnership that just comes along with engaging in the SPEP process. And I know that I've worked with service providers who have appreciated the SPEP process because they felt like they've finally been heard. You know, I think they've appreciated the opportunity to really talk about everything that they do, and to have us as consumers really pay attention to all of the different service offerings that they have, and to feel that we are also invested with them in making those services as effective as possible. I don't think service providers in Pennsylvania feel like they're sitting alone outside in a silo anymore. I think they definitely feel like we are working as a team, which is super important. And I don't know how else that would have happened here if it wasn't for the SPEP, because it's just it's natural to the SPEP. Just by doing a SPEP assessment, you are naturally encouraging the partnership, the education, the transparency. It's just built in there. So you might come in with some of those tools with providers, but the SPEP just builds on that, takes it to another level. And I think that's one thing that Pennsylvania can really speak to in this learning lab environment, is how we have really stepped up to make us a probation and provider community united under the SPEP. And I think I'm proud that that's something I think we do very well.
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate that. And I know I was just doing a lot of talking earlier about all the resources and things. Does anyone have any questions about anything? And you know, again, we talked about possibly, well, we definitely want to on our to-do list is have a repository of resources, tools, things like that have been created throughout all the jurisdictions that we can share across the board. Does anyone have any questions?
I've definitely got a couple messages that folks are really excited about the repository idea.
Oh, so good.
Jump on that.
I'll get right on that. I will. Trust me.
We're going to get on that. No, it's just the idea, again, everybody's one of the good things and the bad things about SPEP, or the difficult things about SPEP, is that it's customized to your jurisdiction. So everything's going to look different. The principles there are still there across the board. Fidelity is still there across the board, but I think there's curiosity. And I think I really appreciate you guys sharing this, because it's one thing to implement SPEP and get a score. It's a very different thing to go the distance, go farther down and say, hey, we're not making recommendations, but now we're creating materials for TA to assist you with those recommendations, and just kind of, and building that community that Sue was talking about. That it's just, I'm very grateful for that. Does anybody else have any questions?
I want to know how big your team is, Dawn. How many people have you got doing all this?
6, including the project manager.
Well, I think that's the unique structure we have, right? We do have 6 dedicated staff to the rollout and facilitation of the project, but again, that pales in comparison to what Sue was talking about in our probation contingent that is very bought into this process, right? They're doing the work as well. So there really is a unique structure in place to roll this out on a very wide scale.
Thanks.
Yeah,
and one of the layers, sorry, Gabrielle.
No, that probation piece and them being part of the STEP team is different in Pennsylvania. They've had great success with it. We don't see that, and it hasn't happened in a lot of our other jurisdictions, mainly because of just structure wouldn't allow it. But it's been
that's a little bit the direction we're headed, Gabrielle. I mean, not to the same degree, but that's definitely kind of our thinking, was to use local folks' labor a little bit to expand our reach.
I think that's great. I'm really excited about working with you this summer. We'll train some more SPEP folks and SPEP informed, and just get more knowledge out there.
Kathy, we're regionally located across the state, so we're not all in the same place. I'm talking to you from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Shannon's up in Erie. Chris is in State College. So that's how we make this work without too much, without it being too overwhelming to the probation officers we work with.
Are there other questions?
Sorry, Gabrielle. I was going to say one other layer of sort of community that we have. We refer to it as the process development team, and that's actually all of our probation officers that are trained as level 2. So they've been around for a while in the team as far as learning SPEP and knowing SPEP. So they've moved up to that next level. So we have, I think we're about 7 level 2 JPOs. So they, also work with us as far as meeting together and coming up with ideas and working on things. So we definitely are always keeping our ears open. Challenges you're facing. What do you guys want to see us create? It's always nice to hear their side of things and get their take. That's all. Sorry.
No. Thank you so much. Does anybody else have questions or comments or anything? There's a huge amount of information, but it's just, I thought it would be very useful. All right, then I'm going to go to our next slide here. If folks could engage for a little bit, if I can ask you to go into the comment section. How would you rate your jurisdiction's current rollout or implementation of SPEP? Just if we would put in your comments, 5, we've got this and we're growing. We've got a little Likert scale here, down to no comment. If still deciding is 1. But if you'd kind of give us just kind of so we can gauge in terms of this group, where everybody is. And with that, let's take about a 5-minute break. And so if you would, again, give an answer, put it in the comment section so that Dawn and Chris and I can take a quick look at it and see where everybody stands. That'll help us and inform us about future meetings. And then we'll do about a 5-minute break. That would be wonderful. Oh, great. We've already got great responses. So let's return at, I'm not even gonna get the time zones right. Let's return just everybody to 2:40 for me and our central time zone folks, and 3:40 for our Eastern time zone folks. And I'm not even gonna pretend to guess the other time zones. Something 40, there we go.
5:40 a.m. maybe?
Yes, 4:40 a.m. Yes, that, oh God, poor thing.
Worth it.
All right, guys, I'm going to actually do the break thing. I will be right back. All right, excellent, guys. We've got a lot of 4s and 5s and some, I got a couple side comments, Chris and Don, as for 1s. Seem to have a lot of people on the same page, at least the folks that are jumping in. And then we've got Carrie. I'm very excited for you, Carrie. Looks like they've got some new data stuff coming that I think will really, really help things.
Yeah, and that's probably been one of our biggest barriers over here in terms of being SPEP ready. We just haven't had people capturing the data needed, or really probably hours of service. Right. But we have a new system that's coming on board mid next year with some really great programs and services functions that will be capturing all of the SPEP data that we need, and that will also be starting to be able to really clearly capture outcome measures for all of our programs and services as well.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Which is really exciting.
I'm so excited about that. Yeah, that's where the implementation kind of, we got stuck. It was with that data piece. And it's, to be honest, I did a presentation a while back on the biggest barriers to implementation in terms of SPEP. The primary one is data. You know, staffing is an issue, but data is really the primary problem. And so actually from that, to be honest, from that came my first thoughts about the notion of SPEP informed. And, you know, let's meet folks where they're at, but let's use the SPEP tools to push folks forward and get them in a better place, right? You can't get data until you can prove that you need it. Those kinds of things.
And we have been definitely in the education zone, but I think as well, and using the SPEP and what we know about the SPEP to help design programs from the get-go. But also, I think our future goals are to also use the SPEP to help us determine where to put our funding for more formal evaluations as well.
That's wonderful. That's exactly what it needs to be used for. That's perfect. That makes me so happy. Yay.
Yeah.
All right. Then we've now got kind of, we're going to open it up for questions for folks who are still with us. Actually, everybody's still here. Questions for myself, for Mark, and jump in, Master Trainer folks, for as needed, or as if you want to have a word or explain something that I babbled on and wasn't clear about, jump in there for that too. I greatly appreciate it. I am actually going to jump this and start us off with a question for Mark. Can you talk a little bit about this update thing you were talking about at the beginning?
Yeah, one of the challenges on the research side of SPEP is that the relevant research keeps growing. Every year there are additional studies, some similar to what we've already collected and compiled, but others in new areas and using better techniques. So I feel like we're pretty much chasing our tail always, trying to keep up with the literature. And the last big update, a really comprehensive update we did was quite a while ago. With a little help from a generous foundation, we have now updated the database through all the available literature we can get our hands on through 2022 and well into 2023. And what I'm doing with that is a little bit different in a way that might interest some of you. The previous body of research we worked with, which was well over 500 studies, covered a very broad range, not only of interventions, but of contexts and types of juvenile offenders, ranging from what really were more prevention programs targeted on kids very much at risk or with minimal involvement, all the way up through residential facilities in juvenile justice agencies. As the SPEP has developed, and I've learned so much from all of you and the different sites where it's been implemented, it's really getting its traction in the context of juvenile justice services. So what we're trying to do on this round is screen the research very carefully for studies that are done in juvenile justice context with kids who are being supervised in the juvenile justice system. And that, even with the update, that narrows the range. We're now dealing with something over 300 studies, which is pretty substantial to draw some conclusions. And we're in the process of putting aside a lot of technical issues and some new technical developments that I won't get into the weeds on because it put too many of you to sleep. The hope here is that we can come up with a finer focus on what is most effective when you're actually working with the SPEP in a juvenile justice context with offenders who are at medium to high risk. That's really where the sweet spot is, I think. And I don't expect dramatic changes in what we've learned, but I'm thinking we can put a much finer point on what we know about what works in that critical context in the hands of probation officers and juvenile justice officers who are working with these kids every day. So that's where we're going. And we actually, I think, will have some preliminary results on that before too much longer.
Mark, I appreciate that. We've got a question here from Estania. Am I saying that right?
You are.
Oh, yay, Estania. It's a beautiful name. It says, do you want to ask the question or shall I read it?
I can ask it. So right now we primarily use SPEP on the QA side for our providers. However, in listening, I'm curious as to how you have incorporated it with your probation workers and how they are using it in their everyday work, you know, as far as making recommendations, working with the court, with the kids. If you could just expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm going to turn that over to the folks in Pennsylvania first, and then anybody else on the call who has incorporated this with their probation folks. Whether they're just starting or thinking about it or moving into that extensively.
I mean, I can start and my staff can fill in the blanks, right? I think some of this was probably driven by our decentralized system, in the sense that, you know, we needed a little bit, we needed some teeth behind getting these assessments rolling. And since our probation departments essentially fund our service providers, there was a natural alignment there. And I would say that as far as what their role is, I think it's kind of twofold. We have level 1 SPEP implementation specialists that are juvenile probation officers. So they are trained to fully implement the SPEP. They participate in the assessments. And so, you know, they're fully engaged in that way. They're committed to the work. They're really involved in that partnership between service provider and obviously probation. And then we have some probation officers throughout the state who are not trained in that level 1, not trained, you know, to fully implement, but we are trying to educate them on the work that is being done, right? So that we have the folks that are fully implementing, and then we have that SPEP informed concept that we're trying to push out to the masses, so they really understand the work that's being done. I would say in many ways, the probation officers that are trained in the SPEP are operating kind of as, you know, quality assurance specialists in many respects. So anything to add from my team?
I mean, I can add from Lehigh County and our staff. So all staff are SPEP informed, but we've had specific trainings around how to talk dosage and duration in court, and also how to use the full program profile, which is a list, like a library of the services at each of the residential providers, and how to use that when making decisions on placements for juveniles. So that's just some of the ways here that we have our staff trained, our line staff, in regards to implementing SPEP.
That's interesting, Tracy. I don't think I realized that you use the full program profile. And for folks who aren't as familiar, or the newbies, this is what's established in classification. Right? What's going on? What are the kids getting? What they're really getting? And so that we then match that to research, so that we can attach the dosage thresholds that are.
Yeah, we also use the feedback reports. So we actually have a shared SPEP folder that has all the SPEPs that we've been involved in, but we also have the full program profiles for all the residential programs that we utilize in Lehigh County. So staff have access to all that information.
I love that. I really like and that's kind of what I was thinking of when I started setting up the full program profile, was the idea that this could be the laundry list of all the services available and kept up to date, not just let's match. The only purpose is to match to research. That's certainly a primary purpose, but another, I think an equally important process is identifying what the kids get. That's been the most shocking to me when I started this work, was how often people don't know what the kids are really getting. And we have the list of names of things, but one person's life skills is another person's anger management, is another person's social skills. So what are the kids really getting? I think it's been really interesting. I'm so glad those things are being used.
Yeah, it's nice with decision making for placements, because we can go in and discuss with the court, because they may ask us, well, why didn't you consider this placement? But we can say, this is why we considered this one. This is what they can offer the juvenile. This is how it's going to address their needs on the YLS. So having our staff trained to be able to sort of talk that language.
It's very interesting. That's good to know.
Yes, I'll add.
Go ahead.
All right. So what Tracy's saying, what we're doing in our county now is, you know, our placement officers, even though they might not be trained in SPEP, we're giving them the tools where to look. You know, the map. I know Don made the SPEP map in Pennsylvania, which, you know, what providers went through the SPEP. There's a map. You could go on it. They can check up. It's like a one-stop shop for our placement officer. And also, what we're doing due to, and I don't know how it is in other jurisdictions, and Shannon, I'm like a broken record when I say this, is we have a problem placing kids in residential facilities right now in Pennsylvania. So what we're doing is with our probation officers and with our service providers is we're stepping our community-based providers to make them as strong as possible, because we feel that there's going to be more kids placed in the community right now because there's such a waiting list right now for our residential treatment providers. So we have that partnership, which is a great thing about SPEP, is sometimes I'll go to a community-based provider and I didn't realize they did something until we do all that full program profile. Like, wow, we didn't even realize you did that. Great, we'd have another resource for our youth. So we're using SPEP in the community. We're not just using it just for the community base, but for the residential as well. But we're focusing right now in the community base because we're seeing more of our youth being placed in the community. So we're improving. It's been great so far. And our providers have been really willing to go through the process.
That's wonderful, Kevin. I'm seeing so many heads nod up and down in terms of the improvement and the focus on community. I know I'll speak for some of the Virginia folks. We're looking at more of the community services now. We're at that phase of implementation, and I think it resonated with a lot of the Virginia folks, at least.
Thank you.
Let's see. There's other questions. Do you have any other questions or thoughts? We're coming close to 4 minutes till. I don't want to wrap it up. And if there's an existing question or thoughts out there.
I just wanted to throw the thought out there real quick that, you know, we are very fortunate in Pennsylvania to have the JJSES, which has those 4 stages. And that was the graphic that was shown early on in the presentation. And I think it's really similar. I mean, I wanted to put a 5 in there, right? It's Pennsylvania, we got this. But at the same time, just from sort of a, we know we're a leader in juvenile justice, but one of the best things that we have going for us is that we're constantly looking at revising our processes. So those 4 stages are very similar to how we look at SPEP and the SPEP process. You know, that first stage is engagement. And then the second stage is initiation. The third stage is behavioral change. And the last stage is refinement. So we've talked a lot about on this call in terms of Pennsylvania with the historical perspective and the very creative things we've been able to do along the way. And then over time, we haven't really stopped there. We keep going back and re-engaging. What does our process look like? Do we have our documents down the way we want? So that's why when you look at our quality measures checklist, it says 7.0. There's been so many versions of that because we're constantly refining. So I guess, you know, and Kevin, you actually said exactly what I was going to talk about, which is those resources. We constantly go back and look at the resources. We go back and update things and we question, are we looking at this the right way? And so I think from, you know, we're fortunate to have EPIS as the implementation hub for evidence-based practice and for SPEP. So it makes sense that we have a place in that particular, in Penn State for that particular purpose of aligning to evidence-based practice and then moving those locally developed services into that evidence-based space. But we're always going to look to refine. So I guess the only thing I could really follow up with here is to wherever you're at, ask questions, keep questioning yourself. Does this serve our purpose? Is there another way to do it? Who around us, even if it's, you know, we have counties on the west end of Pennsylvania that are similar to counties on the east end. And so some of those platforms that we're able to communicate with would no longer, I mean, they wouldn't normally be able to connect with each other proximally because they're not near each other. So utilizing those virtual platform has really been beneficial to us. But like I said, we're always refining and we're always going back, changing what we're doing, initiating new people into the project at whatever level they can be brought in, and continuously doing that engagement to see where the next frontier is. So it's a really exciting time. We've done a lot, but I always feel like I never want to put the 5. I always want to dial back a little, because we want to make sure that we leave room for improvement, and we leave room for us to learn from you guys and what you do in your jurisdiction. So I just wanted to close with that.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to jump into our last slide. I promise I'm wrapping up. In terms of topics of interest, we've already kind of highlighted a couple things. We definitely, folks are very interested in some shared resources. In a resource repository, and putting something like that together. We will jump on that. We've also got some topics of interest that you guys shared from the very beginning. Very interested in barriers, confronting barriers, those kinds of things. We've got other notes as well, but we will be sending out a electronic kind of survey to get at what topics you'd like us to focus on. Again, we're going to keep the same format. We won't do the whole introduction thing at the beginning as elaborately as we did for this inaugural event, but we will jump into education. And through that, we'd like to know what you guys would like in terms of information. Would you be very interested in what other folks are doing? That was another one. Maybe we can have different folks or different jurisdictions discuss what they're doing. Or maybe we could just zero in on classification 101 and tools or something along those lines. But I'm very interested, we're all very interested in what you guys want, because this is your forum. We're learning from each other, but we need your help to give us some ideas about what's most wanted. Then we can then put together, is my second little block here, is the idea of a booster component. What's needed, what are the topics of interest, and then working with our friends in EPIS, Chris and Don, putting together some sort of booster component that can help you in your state or in your jurisdiction, what you're most interested in. Is there a primary training need? As you in Iowa, Kathy, as you go forward in training new folks, is there some sort of booster component that would be very useful? To Patty's point early on, from New Jersey, formerly Delaware, is there something or a tool or something recorded that we could provide for you that would really be useful? And then my last little bullet here, or block here, is we've set up the next meeting. We hope you can join. We are going to record it again so that you have access to that information. And that would be September 20th and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you need me, Carrie, to help you with getting you some espresso beans or something, just let me know. But September 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, whatever that means for y'all in your time zones, that will be our next meeting. But before that, we will definitely reach out to you and figure out what the key topics of interest are. And same format, we're going to partner, educate, meet each other, maybe break down into small groups is my goal. So the small groups, we can actually be even more comfortable sharing opinions and thoughts and concerns and move forward. And then I'll leave it over. I know we're 2 minutes over. I'm very sorry about that. But Chris and Don, do you have anything that you want to share before I close off?
No, nothing else from here. Thought this was great. And like you said, we'll send out a survey really to try to, to gauge what you would like to have. I thought this was great.
Thank you guys. Thank you for everyone. Mark, it's such great to have you, and thank you for welcoming. And Buddy, we wouldn't be here except for Mark, but we also would not be here except for you, Nedge and Mark. So we really do appreciate you, Buddy, and it's so wonderful to see your face. Bye, everybody.
Bye, you guys. Thank you
so much. I look forward to seeing you in September.